The night was older than memory, a silence so vast that even the moon seemed to tremble. Over the highlands, a great stone fortress rose from the white earth like the bones of some ancient beast. Its towers were pale, its ramparts rimmed with frost. The wind howled through its battlements, dragging with it the bitter cry of winter, a sound that pierced the soul more sharply than any sword. Inside the walls, the castle lived in shivers and whispers. Every corridor breathed cold. Every window carried the ghost of ice. Torches along the passageways burned dim, their flames shivering in the draught that slipped between stone cracks older than the lords who ruled here. The air smelled of smoke, damp wool, and something else. Fear, perhaps, or memory. Beneath that roof of darkness, life clung on, fragile, determined, trembling. In the heart of the keep, where banners hung stiff and lifeless, Lord Edric sat before a dying fire. His cloak, lined with fur from wolves slain in warmer years, did little to stop the cold crawling under his skin. The hearth crackled faintly, spitting sparks that died before they reached the air. Beyond the hall, the sound of wind clawed at the shutters, as though the world itself wanted in. He looked toward the door where his steward, Osric, entered with a bowed head. The man's beard was white with frost. Even his breath smoked in the torchlight. "My lord," Osric said quietly, "the stores are nearly gone. The woodpile burns faster each night." Edric nodded, his eyes distant. "And the people?" "They endure," the steward replied, though his voice faltered. "But the fever takes more children every morning." A silence hung between them, long, heavy, and filled with the slow hiss of melting ice dripping from the rafters. Edric turned toward the window slit beside his throne. Beyond it, the snow swirled endlessly, erasing the world in white. For a moment, he thought he saw faces in it. The soldiers who had died defending these walls, their eyes hollow, their lips whispering curses into the storm. "Winter will end," he murmured to no one. "It always does." But the words felt brittle in his mouth, like lies spoken just to hear warmth again. Far below, in the servants' quarters, a different fire burned, smaller, humbler, but alive. Marta, the cook, sat cross-legged by the hearth, her face half hidden by shadows. The air was thick with the smell of boiled onions and smoke. Around her, children huddled close, wrapped in patched blankets. One boy leaned against her arm, whispering, "Tell the story again." She smiled faintly. "Which one?" "The one about the lady in the tower," he said. "The one who made summer from her tears." Marta's voice softened. "Ah, Lady Aelwyn. They say when the first winter fell upon this land, she wept for her people. Her tears touched the snow, and where they fell, flowers grew, even in frost." The boy's eyes widened. "Did it really happen?" Marta gazed into the fire. "Maybe not," she said. "But stories are what keep us warm when the firewood runs out." Her voice trembled, not from cold, but from something deeper. The fear that even stories might one day freeze. The castle groaned like a living creature. At dawn, frost bloomed across its walls, a silver skin that cracked and glittered in the light of pale suns. The wind roared through arrow slits, sweeping through empty chambers where tapestry swayed like weary sentinels. Every stone seemed to sigh, heavy with centuries of prayers, cries, and the quiet endurance of those who had once survived the same cruelty. Servants swept snow from the corridors, though it fell again before they could finish. They carried buckets of water turned half to ice, their hands raw and red. In the stables, horses stamped and snorted, their breaths thick with steam. Even the animals seemed to understand that warmth was not a right, but a battle. The masons sealed cracks with straw and mud, while mothers wrapped their infants in layers of wool, pressing them close against their chests. And in every room, the same sound: coughing, whispering, the mutter of prayer. In a small chapel near the western tower, Sister Alina tended to the fire that burned before the altar. Her fingers were blistered from carrying logs, her robes stiff with soot, but she did not stop. The flame was her duty, and her defiance. When the wind howled through the cracks, she whispered to the fire, "Do not die, my friend. They need you more than they know." Sometimes she imagined she heard it answer, a hiss, a breath, a sigh that said, "I'm trying." Nights came to her in silence, their armor dull from cold. They knelt before the altar, their lips moving wordlessly, seeking warmth that prayer alone could not give. Alina watched them, her heart aching. She knew that faith could not melt ice, but it could stop a heart from turning to it. And that was enough. By midwinter, the castle was half-starved, half-haunted. The dead were buried in shallow graves beneath the snow. Bells no longer rang for them. They were too cold to move. The sound of mourning had become part of the wind. Yet life persisted. Children still ran through the corridors, their laughter sharp and thin like cracks in glass. They played near the kitchens, pretending the glowing embers were dragons. When the fire flared, they clapped. When it dimmed, they blew on it as if their tiny breaths could save it. And in a way, they did. Because even in the coldest corners of the world, hope was always a small, stubborn flame. The kind that refused to go out no matter how deep the snow. One night, when the wind died for the first time in weeks, Lord Edric ordered a feast. Not a grand one. There was no meat left, and the ale was frozen in its barrels, but enough to gather the living together. Candles lined the great hall. Their light trembled on every face, pale, hollow, and still alive. Marta ladled thin stew into wooden bowls, and even the smell of broth made people close their eyes with gratitude. Someone began to sing, softly, off-key, but with courage. The sound filled the room like warmth spreading through stone. A boy beat rhythm on the table. A maid laughed. An old knight raised his cup and said, "We've seen worse." And for a heartbeat, it felt true.
We made it.
The castle, for all its cold, glowed from within. Not from fire, but from people refusing to surrender. But winter was not yet done. Days later, the sky turned black again, and the storm came down with the fury of a god scorned. Snow fell so thick it buried the walls, sealed doors, smothered light. The hearths roared, and still could not fight it back. Wind tore at the towers, splitting banners, scattering ashes. Inside, breath turned to frost in the air. People huddled together, wrapped in every cloth they owned. Firewood vanished. Doors were torn from hinges and burned. The chapel flame, Sister Alina's sacred fire, dwindled to a glow no brighter than a dying star. When it finally went out, she fell to her knees. Tears froze on her cheeks before they could fall. That night, the castle slept without fire. The cold crept through its walls, through skin and bone, through dream and prayer. In every room, silence, the kind that hums, deep and endless, like the breath of death itself. Lord Edric sat in his chamber, wrapped in furs. He could hear the snow pressing against the windows, whispering like ghosts. He thought of his father, who had faced the same winters long ago. He thought of the stones beneath him, soaked with centuries of suffering. And he thought, perhaps this was what the castle demanded. Endurance, no matter the cost. He closed his eyes and saw his people, sleeping, praying, holding each other against the dark. And he whispered to the wind, "Take me if you must, but spare them." The wind answered with a sound that might have been laughter or mercy. No one remembered when the storm ended. One morning, the air changed. Light, real light, spilled through the windows. The frost that clung to the walls began to sweat. Snow melted from the eaves and ran in rivers down the courtyard. The castle breathed again. Marta was the first to step outside. The world was white, silent and still. But in the east, the sky was gold. She knelt, scooped a handful of melting snow and let it run through her fingers. It felt like forgiveness. Lord Edric followed, his face pale but alive. He looked at his people, thin, scarred but standing, and felt something break inside him. He reached down, took a burning coal from a brazier and placed it in the snow. It hissed, steam rising like ghosts ascending. "Remember this," he said. "We endured." Years passed. The castle survived, scarred but proud, its stones warmed by the hands and hearts that had refused to surrender. Each winter that followed seemed smaller, tamer, as if the storm itself had learned respect. Travelers came and they spoke of the old winter, the one that nearly broke the world. They said that in those days people made warmth not from wood or flame, but from faith, in each other, in survival, in life itself. And sometimes on the coldest nights when the wind moaned through the towers, the fire in the great hall would flare for no reason. Servants swore they saw shapes in the smoke. A woman smiling, a knight bowing his head, a child laughing in the light. Maybe the castle remembered. Maybe the fire did too. Because even stone, when it survives long enough, learns the shape of human hope. And so, through the centuries, the legend of the cold castle lived on. A monument not to power or war, but to endurance. To the hearts that burned when the world turned to ice. To the souls who believed that no winter, no matter how endless, could ever truly kill the warmth within. In the end, it was not fire that kept them alive. It was faith. It was love. It was each other. And long after the last ember died, their story continued to burn. Softly, silently, in the heart of every human who has ever faced the cold and chosen to live.